Clang! The sharp sound of metal hitting the floor sliced through the tense air like a knife. The entire stage of VAPA, where Brent Ashton was belting the final high note of a Verdi aria, froze in an instant. The piano stopped. Brent's voice caught mid-note like something had clamped around his throat. A lone wrench lay on the polished hardwood floor right at his feet. From the scaffold above, Grace Holloway froze. She wore a janitor's uniform, still holding a new light bulb in her hand, her body leaning toward the third lighting rig on the left, the one that urgently needed replacing to prevent glare during dress rehearsal. But her sweaty hand had failed to grip the tool properly. A flicker of panic swept through her eyes, her heart pounding violently in her chest. She quickly spoke up, her voice hoarse and strained. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." From the stage, Brent whipped around his face, flushed red. In the Academy's world, Brent was a star, the leading tenor of VAPA, a man who had never missed a beat on stage. Now every eye, the guest directors, the vocal professors, the graduating students, was locked on him. And above him stood an unknown girl changing a light bulb. "Hey you, Brent," roared his voice booming across the theater. "What the hell did you just do? Do you realize you just ruined our entire dress rehearsal?" Grace took a step back, her legs slightly trembling. She nodded, repeating, "I'm sorry, I really didn't. Oh my God." Another voice rang out from the audience. Tiffany Marlowe, Brent's rumored girlfriend, in a little black dress that barely qualified as appropriate, stood up and strutted toward the stage. "This is the worst display of unprofessionalism I've ever seen. Who allows maintenance staff to work during a rehearsal? Brent, are you okay?" Brent waved her off, signaling he wanted to continue, but his eyes stayed cold, locked on the scaffold where Grace stood, frozen. Whispers stirred from the VAPA elite seated on stage left. One student shook their head and snickered. The guest director rubbed his temples. The air grew heavy with tension. "All right, that's enough," a voice cut in from the soundboard. Leo Martinez, a final-year student in sound production, rose from his seat holding the internal mic. He adjusted the volume and looked straight toward the stage. "Sorry, everyone. I called Grace in to fix the light. It's my fault for not checking the rig before rehearsal." Brent frowned. "You're the sound engineer, right? Then you know tomorrow's performance includes major sponsors in the audience." "I do," Leo replied evenly. "Which is exactly why I wanted the lighting fixed." Grace was just doing her job. Tiffany flipped her hair and dropping tools, making noise, throwing Brent off pitch. Was that part of her job too? Leo looked at her, then up at Grace. "She didn't mean to, but if anyone here has gone the entire semester without a single technical mistake, feel free to throw the first stone." Silence blanketed the room for 3 seconds. "Come down, Holloway." Another voice called from backstage, the tech manager. "You just caused a serious incident. We'll be reporting this one more time, and you'll be suspended from your shift." Grace nodded her hand, still trembling slightly as she slowly descended from the scaffold. She slipped behind the curtain, avoiding every gaze. As she passed Brent, she met his eyes, cold, hard, and venomous. Leo silently watched her go, still clutching the mic. At a place like VAPA, even the smallest mistake was enough to make you the target of the entire system's contempt. But what Brent and Tiffany didn't know was that Grace Holloway would not vanish like the countless invisible names before her. And the wrench today was only the opening note. 4 in the afternoon. Grace sat curled up in the corner of the backstage tech room. The light bulb wasn't replaced yet. She hadn't dared return to the stage area. That damn wrench still echoed in her head like a broken melody. Above her, The internal speaker crackled with more vocal warm-ups. Brent was singing again. He must have calmed down, or found someone else to take it out on. Grace closed her notebook, wiping the smudged ink with the edge of her sleeve. A blurred line now covered what she'd jotted down last night. Output to XLR. Cable 7 must be secured. Reversed input will distort mic channel 3. Footsteps. High heels are getting closer. Well, look who's still here. Skylar Pearson blocked the doorway. She wore a cropped white VAPA tee, her blonde hair half-tied soda can in hand. Tiffany followed, arms crossed. She can't even hold a wrench properly, and yet Leo Martinez defends her. Hilarious, Tiffany said, dragging out her voice like she was on stage. Grace said nothing. She quietly stood and began collecting her tools. Don't walk away when I'm talking to you. Skylar stepped forward, then an intentional nudge. Cold soda spilled from Grace's collar down to her wrist. She froze, eyes wide. Her notebook on the desk was soaked. Oh no. My bad, Skylar. Cooed voice, syrupy sweet. My hand slips sometimes, especially around people with advanced technical skills like you. Tiffany laughed. From the far end of the room, a freshman named Malik stood waiting for his sound check. He fidgeted, glancing between Grace and Skylar, then quickly looked down and pretended to play with his headphone wires. Grace bit her lip. The smell of soda soaked into her shirt, icy cold. She bent down and gently wrung out her notebook. The ink bled into the page, blurring the chords she'd copied the night before. Tiffany snatched the towel from Grace's hand. Borrowing this. You look so wet, it's uncomfortable to watch. Skylar walked off, calling out as she left. Next time, make sure those bolts are tight. Wouldn't want something else falling from the ceiling. Might not be a wrench next time. The door slammed behind them. Grace remained where she stood, hand gripping the notebook tightly. A single tear slid down her cheek so fast she didn't notice, but she inhaled slow and deep and turned back to the desk. She booted up the console, rechecking the output settings from that morning. A small error, but not hers. Mic channel 3 had already been wired wrong. Not my fault, she repeated silently, like a quiet inner melody. Then a notification popped up on the screen. Shift schedule updated, booth C, Grace Holloway, 8 p.m. Her brows furrowed. That slot originally belonged to Leo. Right then, Leo Martinez stepped in, headphones around his neck, stylus in hand. He paused when he saw her. Sorry, he said calmly. I switched shifts. You should take tomorrow night. Fewer people. No distractions. Grace nodded. Leo didn't say anything more, but just before turning to leave, his gaze landed on the soaked notebook. And for the first time since morning, his eyes revealed something: empathy. At least someone noticed, even if the whole system chose not to. Grace dried each page of her notebook. Though she had left it out under the afternoon sun spilling through the backstage window, several parts were still smudged, especially near the end, where she had written down an unfinished chord progression. It was from a song that had no name. She had never given any of her melodies a name. She thought back to a winter night in Wisconsin when she was 11. Music, Grace, doesn't need a name. Her grandmother, June Holloway, had said that as they sat together in the kitchen beside a crackling wood stove. You just need the right notes at the right time, and the right truth. Back then, Grace didn't fully understand what her grandmother meant, but the way June gently tapped the back of her hand, then placed an old acoustic guitar across her lap, left a mark that never faded. Grandma June's voice was low, not polished like a professional singer, but every time she sang, the whole kitchen seemed to stop. Grace stopped singing after her grandmother died, not because she didn't love music, but because that pain was too heavy to put into words. Since then, All her music had gone into notebooks, never performed, never shared, just quiet melodies written down to preserve something that couldn't be taken away. A soft knock at the tech room door. Leo Martinez peeked in, not looking at her right away. He set down his headphones and iPad on the table, then started organizing the patch cables. Grace kept wiping her notebook, her hand pausing near one of the last pages. The soda stain had blurred a sequence CFGC and a handwritten note about supplemental instrumentation. A second later, Leo froze. He stared at the notebook page. Midwest. Last year, he asked softly, almost to himself. Grace looked up. You played in the semi-finals. Purple-lit stage. Old Martin guitar with a J engraved on the side, Leo said, like testing a memory. Grace didn't respond, but she looked at him, just one subtle nod, enough to confirm. Leo didn't press, but he lowered his head, slightly smiling. I knew I wasn't wrong. The room was quiet for a while, only the faint hum of the ventilation fan. Leo returned to his corner and opened the system file. Grace closed her notebook, then turned to the acoustic guitar, hanging on the wall. She hadn't planned to play, but somehow her hand had already reached for the strings. Her fingers moved a glide from G to D7, then back to C. The room suddenly felt different. No one spoke. No one moved. And just as the final chord faded, the red exit light near the door blinked softly rhythmically, like a metronome, counting down to the moment when her silence would end. The tech shift schedule was updated at 7:48 a.m. the next morning. Grace Holloway's name appeared in the slot for sound tech. Theater B, replacing the previous technician, Jay Winston. Jay Winston didn't complain. He was busy with rehearsals for an advanced Broadway dance class, and no one really wanted to deal with tech support shifts for the main performance group, especially not Brent Ashton's. Leo just quietly typed a few commands. He didn't tell Grace, didn't ask, didn't explain. She only saw her name pop up in the system message along with a connection diagram for the equipment. At exactly 8:10, Grace arrived at the back door of Theater B. Through the narrow gap, she heard the sound of a digital piano and a steady clapping rhythm. Brent's voice echoed inside. No, no, no. Back up 4 beats, the cello comes in. Then I enter. Not after that dang part. The instructor stood near the wing, flipping sheet music, brow furrowed. Is there anyone from tech here? A string player looked up. I think they switched staff this morning. It's that girl. Something. Grace walked in, headphones on cable box in her arms, eyes down. Brent turned immediately. You! His voice nearly burst into a shout. Don't tell me you're handling the monitors today. The instructor looked up about to speak, but Leo, seated in the back, raised a hand, slightly confirming. Brent clenched his fists. I said clearly that I didn't want Brent, the instructor interrupted. We're already 20 minutes behind schedule. Brent exhaled sharply and turned away. Skylar sat in the front row. Tiffany gave Grace a quick once-over, then let out a small laugh, just loud enough for the girls beside her to giggle too. Better be careful, Skylar said. Don't drop anything again. This stage floor costs over 10 grand. Or the mic, Tiffany added. We don't want fried headphones because of a mismatched signal. Grace placed the box down and began pulling out cables. Her heartbeat stayed steady, but her fingers gripped the connector a bit tighter. She walked straight onto the stage where Brent stood at center mic, aimed at the empty rows. What are you doing, main monitor? Jack Grace replied softly. Right channels distorted. Brent glanced toward the instructor, then nodded. 30 seconds. Grace crouched, threading the cable under the mic stand without touching anyone. She plugged the jack into the output port. A small click sounded. The entire monitor system flickered. The green light blinked on. Brent sang again, and this time the sound rang clear. No static, no buzz. The whole class fell silent. You fixed that Grace didn't answer. She just stood up and turned toward the audience seats. Leo was there dressed in black tech gear, eyes steady on her. He gave a slight nod, but in that brief second, something else passed through his gaze, a flicker of familiarity, as if he knew exactly what it felt like to be dismissed by an entire system. Grace stepped down, saying nothing. But just then, Skylar whispered, "Don't think a few cables make you worthy of stepping on this stage." Grace turned back. She stood at the last step of the platform, one hand still holding a jack. The other was at her side. Light caught in her eyes, and for the first time they saw she didn't look away. She just looked straight ahead. "Piano's off tempo," Brent said flatly. "I'm singing on beat, but it feels like I'm chasing the keyboard." The instructor frowned. "Can you double-check, please?" Grace nodded and walked toward the main keyboard. She sat down, put on the monitor headphones, and gently ran her fingers over the EQ controls and MIDI input. Everything was in place. No errors in the system. Brent folded his arms and stepped back. "I'll sing the section again. You can listen this time." Third chorus. He nodded to Corey the pianist, then started, "And if I lose it all tonight, I'll find you in the silence." Grace closed her eyes, just as she suspected. The issue wasn't technical. Brent was entering a quarter beat late, accustomed to the studio version, not the new live arrangement. But she stayed quiet. Well, Skylar spoke up. "Any insights yet, Ms. Lead Technician?" Grace removed her headphones. "The vocalist is off by a quarter beat." The room froze. Brent narrowed his eyes. "What did you just say, quarter beat off?" Tiffany scoffed, a sound assistant critiquing tempo. "Why don't you try playing it then?" Grace stood up. "No, I was just—" "No, seriously," Skylar cut in. "We'd love to learn. Show us what the perfect quarter beat sounds like. Just play the intro to the chorus, 2 bars is enough." The instructor hesitated, but Skylar added with a smirk, "My dad just donated a new mic set to the school. I don't think her few seconds will hurt." A moment of pause. Then the instructor nodded. Grace looked down at the keyboard. Roland RD 2000. Silver white, sensitive to every touch. She placed her right index finger on G. Her left hand rested on low E, and then she played. The first 4 notes, precise tempo, clean expression, no flourish, no attempt to impress. G, A, F, D. The sound traveled through the monitor system like sliding across stretched glass, crisp and pure. As the last note faded, an unusual silence fell across the room. Corey, the lead pianist, blinked, then gave a slight nod. A few instrumentalists glanced at each other, their eyes hesitant. Brent looked down at her hands, eyebrows slightly furrowed, as if trying to match what he'd just heard with the arrangement in his head. Skylar sat up straight, gripping the edge of her seat, while Tiffany rolled her eyes, but this time no one joined in. The room had shifted just slightly. A momentary imbalance, subtle but unmistakable. Grace stood up. "There's no issue with the system." She removed the headphones, set them on the table, and turned to leave. A flicker of relief crossed her face so fast no one noticed. Her hand, still close to the keys, tightened briefly, then relaxed. At the back of the room, Leo leaned against the wall. No applause, no smile. But his eyes never left her. A slow, deliberate nod, as if confirming something he had long suspected. No need for clapping, no need for explanation. Only the final note still rings in the monitors. And the silence, not from mockery this time, but because everyone now understood she was right. After Grace stepped away from the keyboard, she didn't look back. She walked straight to the tech table as if nothing had just happened. But everyone in the room knew something had changed. A thin line had just been drawn between the tech assistant and someone you shouldn't underestimate. The instructor cleared his throat. All right, let's continue with the ensemble section. But even he needed a few seconds to reset the tempo. Brent said nothing, but he moved from center stage to stand with the backup singers where he was no longer the focus. Leo Martinez looked at Grace's name tag, then back at the piano. The way she sat the pressure in her pinky finger, it was all starting to connect. That afternoon in the basement tech room, Grace took off her headphones and sat on a tall chair with a broken backrest. The room was silent, like a sound tank, holding unspoken notes. On the table were an old laptop, her notebook, and a sandwich she had forgotten to eat since lunch. The door opened no knock. It was Skylar. She walked in, without looking at Grace, went straight to the mixer and pretended to check the screen. Nice little performance, Skylar said, drawing out her words. Are you planning to audition, or are you just here to polish mics for fun? Grace didn't react. Her hand kept writing lyrics on a new page. First of all, Skylar continued, you might think you scored points today, but around here points don't go to people who can play an instrument. They go to people whose names are on the final performance list. I'm on that list. Are you? Grace didn't look up. Skylar leaned in one hand, pressing against the table. You don't get how this place works. At VAPA, it's about image, legacy, family. What do you have? A notebook and some backwater chords. Still no response. Skylar laughed. Oh, right. You're from Kansas, aren't you? I've skimmed the files on girls like you. C-tier scholarship, regional quota, just enough GPA. You think you can compete with us? Grace turned the page, wrote another line. Her hand tightened slightly around the pen. Skylar snatched the notebook from her. Answer me. Do you actually think you have a shot? She held the notebook up, swinging it slightly, as if deciding whether to rip or toss it. Her eyes sparkled with spite. Silence. Then Grace stood. She didn't grab the notebook back, didn't raise her voice. She just looked Skylar straight in the eyes for the first time all week. Give it back. Only 4 words, but her voice was calm and steady. Skylar blinked, then tossed the notebook onto the table. Cute, she sneered. But don't forget to close the door when you leave a place you don't belong in. She turned to go. But just as she reached the doorway, she bumped into Leo Martinez. He didn't step inside, but he had heard enough to understand everything. Planning to audition with that bullying act? Leo asked, not smiling. Skylar gave a smug laugh and brushed past him without answering. Leo turned toward Grace. She sat back down, picked up the notebook, and gently smoothed out the pages, carefully flattening the bent corners like she was trying to keep everything intact. You okay? He asked. Grace took a deep breath. Her hand was still trembling slightly as she ran it over the page. I'm fine, she said, her voice level, but carrying a weariness that couldn't be hidden. Leo stood there for a moment. He looked after Skylar, a familiar bitterness rising in his chest. He, too, had once been the outsider, at VAPA looked down on for not having the right background. He knew that feeling. And he knew Grace deserved better than this. Then he stepped out and gently closed the door behind him. This time, there was a small click. The door to the tech room had closed. But it wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. That evening, after classes had ended, most students had already left VAPA. The hallways fell silent, filled only with the soft hum of the ventilation system. Grace was still there. She sat in the auxiliary recording room, wearing headphones, layering gentle acoustic guitar onto her demo track. In the world of sound, she existed without needing to explain. Every melody was a piece of truth hers and hers alone. As she paused to save the file, a voice came from the doorway. "That track yours?" Grace turned. It was Leo. He leaned against the doorframe backpack, slung over one shoulder. His gaze calm, but visibly impressed. Grace nodded. Leo stepped closer. "You wrote all of it. The guitar and the melody and the lyrics," Grace said, quietly tapping her notebook. Leo nodded slowly. He glanced through the scattered tracks, but his attention froze on the hook she had just recorded. "That melody, it's raw but powerful. It doesn't sound like anything I've heard here." Grace stayed quiet. Leo continued, "People are submitting demos for the final audition. You should send this one." Grace hesitated. "But I don't have a group. And," Leo cut in, "I can submit it for you. Or you can submit it yourself." Grace looked at the computer screen silent for a few seconds. "Thank you, Leo. But this one, I want to submit myself. After everything that's happened, I think my music needs its own voice, even if it's just this once." Leo nodded, saying nothing more. He stepped inside, placing his hand on the headphones to replay the section she had just edited. Grace returned to the laptop. She opened a file tagged VAPA Final. It was the piece she had written back in Kansas, the only song she ever played with all 10 fingers in her small wooden room, its sound rough and honest. The song was about finding strength in silence, about holding on to one's identity amid the noise, a confession she had never dared to speak out loud. She copied the file to a USB drive, then opened the VAPA submission portal. The interface appeared cold and clinical. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dragged the VAPA final file into the submission box. One click, submission received. The simple phrase appeared, but to Grace, it thundered like a storm. The clock read 9:47 p.m. No one knew. But that night, a quiet girl from Kansas submitted a piece of music as if it were a weapon made of silence. Monday, 8:00 a.m. In front of Building C, the air was tight, like a drawn string. A loud voice rang out from the end of the hallway. "The audition list is posted." A crowd of students rushed forward, pushing and squeezing as if some dramatic news had just broken. A group of VAPA elite morning gowns, eyeliner, sharp as knives, led the way, no one wanting to miss the moment their name might appear in glory. Tiffany stood on tiptoe, nearly climbing over the student in front. "Am I on it? Is Brent on it?" "Tell me," Brent shouted. "Yes. My name's there, right under Skylar's." "Oh my God." Tiffany jumped up and down. "I'm in too. We're in the same group. This is destiny. It's fate." But then another voice rose, not a scream, but clear and loud. "Wait, Grace Holloway." The energy shifted. Every eye turned to the bulletin board. One name stood alone. Grace Holloway, solo performance, original composition. Brent stuttered. What?" Tiffany spun around in disbelief. "Grace." That girl Skylar frowned. "The janitor." The words hit like a slap. "She submitted after the deadline," Tiffany said loudly. "No one even saw her turn anything in. She's not in the performance class. She's not part of any group." A student in the crowd added grace. "You mean the girl with brown hair who's always mopping the recording room?" Another whispered, "Never heard of her. And she's doing a solo. That must be something." Someone else nodded. Maybe her demo really was that strong. Skylar clenched her phone. There must be some mistake, or someone pulled strings for her. In the crowd, Professor Kim, the one in charge of the stage module, crossed her arms, frowning. "That's not possible. She wasn't even on the internal nomination list." A professor's voice came from behind, calm but sharp. "Sometimes, Professor Kim, real talent speaks for itself. The jury only needs to listen." While the hallway buzzed with whispers and doubt, Grace was in the basement tech room. She was sitting beside the old piano, adjusting the strings. The recorder replayed her old demo, but she wasn't listening to the music, she was listening to something deeper inside. The door opened. Leo stepped in. "The list is up," he said. "You made it." Grace looked up slightly, a quiet smile flickering on her lips. "I know." Leo blinked. "Solo. Just you. That's what I chose." He walked over and placed his phone on the table. The screen was still open to the list: Brent, Skylar, Tiffany in the same group. Skylar slammed her phone when she saw your name. Brent just froze. Grace gave a small smile. "Fair enough." Leo watched her. "Grace, you're shaking the system. They don't know how to handle someone like you." She exhaled softly. "I'm not doing it for them." "Then who for?" She paused, then said, "For my grandmother. For myself. For those who never had the chance to say what they needed to say, but kept writing every note anyway." Leo nodded. "Seems like your demo really made Professor Sully stop and listen to the whole thing." He looked at her for another moment. "When you step on that stage, don't just let them hear you. Make the entire hall forget to breathe." Grace lifted her gaze. For the first time, her eyes didn't just reflect silence, they showed resolve. "I will." After Leo left, she opened her notebook. A new page. Blue ink. Her hand was steady, as if carving a vow. VAPA finale, one voice. One truth. Beneath it was an empty space left for the final lyrics, where the music hadn't yet begun, but was waiting. And this time, the world would have no choice but to listen. That evening. Building A. VAPA's main performance hall. The LED lights outside the lobby were still shining bright. A VAPA finale banner stretched between two flagpoles, its background printed with a shimmering silver logo. Everything looked ready for the most important performance night of the year. But in the underground tech level, a backstage staff member stared at a computer screen. "Program 17 won't open." Another leaned in. "System error? No. Someone locked the folder. It's completely inaccessible." "What's Program 17? He flipped through the logbook. His eyes froze. "Grace Holloway, solo, original composition." The next morning, 7:00 a.m. Grace stood alone outside Studio 4C. She didn't go in. She leaned against the wall, notebook in hand. On the page was a familiar line. One voice. One truth. Leo arrived holding two paper coffee cups still steaming. "You're early," he said, handing her one. "I wanted to make sure my track's still there," Grace replied, looking him in the eyes. "Yesterday, someone tried to lock folder 17. Leo froze. "You already know," Grace nodded. "I don't think it was a system glitch. Someone doesn't want me on stage tonight." Leo gripped his cup tightly. Could be Brent, or Skylar, or Professor Kim. Grace didn't respond, just exhaled slow and quiet. "And if they really did delete it?" Leo asked, voice low. Grace opened her notebook and pointed to a blank page beneath the title, Finale. "I'm rewriting it. From scratch." Leo looked at her, but said nothing. There was something in Grace's expression that stopped him, an unshakable silence, the kind that comes only when someone is truly ready to face whatever comes. At that same moment in the program committee's meeting room, the atmosphere was suffocating. "I still object," Professor Kim said loudly. "Program 17 was never on the internal nomination list, and Grace Holloway, isn't even a performance student. She's a tech staffer." Another professor cut in. "She submitted her demo on time, and we never established rules about who's eligible to submit. But this list is highly competitive." Professor Kim slammed the table. "How can someone with no mentor, no coursework, end up performing solo on the official stage?" Professor Sully responded calmly, "She has a piece, and it's good enough to be chosen. We are an Academy of the Arts, not a private club, guarding some elite student list." A younger professor hesitated. "There are rumors that Program 17's file was just lost." "So," Sully interrupted, "I've heard Grace's arrangement. If a performance disappears due to technical issues, then we need to ask whether this system serves the arts or the egos of a few individuals." No one replied. Across campus in the cafeteria, students were whispering. "Who is she, Grace? The girl who cleans the recording room? Did she really write her own music? Are there any videos? Rumor is her demo made." Professor Sully stand up and applaud. One student pulled out a phone and pointed to the internal forum. "Grace Holloway is trending. Someone called her the ghost musician." The gossip spread fast. People began glancing around, trying to spot her. But Grace was nowhere to be seen, because right then, she was sitting in the tech room, staring at a red message on her laptop screen. "Access denied. File not found." Grace wasn't surprised. She closed her eyes for a few seconds. Then, she opened her notebook, pulled out a blue pen, and began rewriting every note from memory. Tuesday, 10:00 a.m. Sound room, 1C. The entire production class sat in a semicircle row of chairs facing a large LED screen. At the podium, Professor Helena was preparing for the demo review of the upcoming gala performances. "We'll listen to each arrangement, take notes, and we'll discuss afterward." Brent, Tiffany, and Skylar sat in the front row, glancing at each other. Each face carried a hint of tension, part frustration, part reluctance. Professor Helena pressed a key. The screen flickered. Track 01, Brent x Skylar, mashup pop version. The track played note by note. The class listened in silence. Helena nodded slowly, Skylar tilted her shoulder, and Brent gave a smug wink. Track 02, Tiffany x Mia, duet remix. As the final beat faded, Helena clicked to the next track. Track 03, Grace Holloway, original composition. The moment struck before anyone could brace for it. A simple acoustic guitar rang out, slow, resonant. Then a voice followed, low, clear, unadorned. It was Grace's voice. The entire room fell silent. Brent whipped around to look at Skylar. Tiffany leaned back, staring at the screen. Professor Helena narrowed her eyes. Her usual casual gaze turned sharp. No one said a word. The screen pulsed in rhythm with the music. Grace's voice climbed, then drifted down like rolling waves. No theatrics, no performance, just one unmistakable truth being spoken. Beneath the front row, Brent slowly sat back in his seat. "Wait," he muttered. "This isn't right." Tiffany was breathing hard. When did she even submit this? Skylar threw a tense glance toward the floor. Grace wasn't in that room. She was still in the tech studio, writing each section of her composition from memory. When the music ended, the classroom remained frozen, in silence. Helena stood up. For the first time in weeks, her voice took on a sharper edge. "Who used Studio 1C to record that demo?" Brent hesitated. Skylar shook her head. Tiffany shifted her feet. Helena turned around, scanning the entire class. "Who accessed this file before today?" A few students started whispering. Helena magnified the screen. A metadata window popped up, submission time Monday night, just before the deadline. User 1C technical. An unfamiliar tag, but indisputable. The cracks began to show. Leo stood just outside the door, watching their stunned faces. He pulled out his phone and texted Grace. They just heard the demo. The room is basically frozen. Grace read the message. Her fingers were still sketching musical notes. She simply replied, "Tonight. Someone's going to have to listen." Tuesday. 11:00 a.m., a few hours after the demo session. In a third-floor office, cold lights beamed down on a long conference table. Inside, 4 faculty members from the performance committee sat around it, Helena Sully Kim and MacArthur. The tension was palpable. At the center of the table lay a printed file metadata from the newly submitted track titled Grace Holloway, Original Composition. Professor Kim started first. "I don't approve. This file is invalid. The sender isn't part of the performance division. She has no assigned mentor. No formal documentation attached." Helena sat upright. "The file was submitted last night from Studio 1C. Metadata confirms a technical user account. Format is correct. And more importantly, that music held an entire class silent for 3 minutes." MacArthur added, "The issue is Grace Holloway wasn't in the original shortlist. We can't allow this one exception to disrupt the structure of the program." Helena looked at each person slowly. "What structure? A closed system, where only students with the right backers get to be seen." She submitted on time, and she earned it. Sully nodded. "I listened to that piece 3 times. You can feel how the writer thought through every note, every pause." "That's a real arrangement," Kim scoffed lightly. "We're talking about a janitor. Have any of you considered how this will look to our VIP guests if anyone can end up on stage with a file sent at midnight? What happens to VAPA's standards?" Helena clenched her jaw. "I've taught lost kids before. I've seen the timid eyes of buried talent." Grace didn't ask for special treatment. She just submitted a piece of music, and that music speaks for itself. Kim gripped her pen tightly. "We need a formal vote," Sully replied. "Fine, but don't expect me to stay quiet." MacArthur nodded. "We'll vote by the end of the day. For now, Program 17 is suspended." Helena stood, quietly, but her eyes were sharp as steel. "Very well, but if any of you dare erase that piece, be ready to answer to the public. VAPA may be a grand stage, but it's the forgotten ones who are truly watching." She walked out, leaving the other 3 in silence. In the hallway, Leo was already waiting. The moment he saw Helena, he asked quietly, "They're pulling the piece." Helena gave a faint nod, temporarily. Leo pulled out his phone and sent a single message to Grace. "They're trying to erase your name, but it won't be that easy." At the same moment in the basement tech room, Mason, a sophomore in charge of internal audio systems, was checking the server logs per Leo's request. He suddenly frowned. Why is there admin access logged in the middle of the night? He moved the cursor and enlarged the system log, file 17. Last accessed admin override, 02:12 a.m. Mason opened the cache memory. The file was still there, but now labeled Access Denied, locked by system admin. He rushed into the hallway phone, shaking in his hand. Just as Leo passed by, Mason called out, "Leo, you need to see this." Leo stopped and read the line on the screen. Someone had illegally locked the original file in the middle of the night, and now they had their first trace. Tuesday, 12:45 p.m. In the small underground tech room, dim light reflected off the computer screen. Mason, a second-year audio student, sat before the central control system, while Leo stood behind him, arms crossed. "You're sure?" Leo asked, eyes fixed on the monitor. Mason nodded. "Sure. Access happened at 2:12 a.m. using an internal admin account. But not everyone has that clearance." He typed a few commands. A system log appeared: user admin VAPA 03, device terminal 4B, location Studio 4C auxiliary tech room. Leo tilted his head. "Studio 4C, isn't that where Brent and Skylar's group rehearse?" Mason glanced up. "Exactly. And only a few people are authorized to use that machine." Leo thought for a moment. Show me the login activity within 30 minutes before and after that timestamp. Mason ran the search. After a few seconds, he murmured, 3 logins. But only one matches the IP. Someone logged in at 2:11 a.m. and logged out at 2:15. No surveillance footage camera system in that area was under maintenance. Leo gave a dry laugh. How convenient. Mason frowned. But I found something else. Before the file was locked, the old demo was opened just once at 2:13. So whoever it was, they listened to it. Leo nodded. So it wasn't just sabotage. They wanted to know what Grace was hiding. Mason turned his eyes serious. Could have been someone from the VAPA elite, or a professor. Leo clenched his jaw. Can you trace the user ID? I can, but it'll take time. I need access to the main server. And, if I get caught, I could be expelled. Leo was silent for a moment. Then he placed a hand on Mason's shoulder. If you can't do it, I'll find another way. But thank you for believing in this. Mason gave a small smile. No one's ever trusted me with something this important before. Leo pulled out his phone and texted Helena, confirmed the original file was accessed illegally from Studio 4C at 2:12 a.m., likely linked to VAPA Elite. Helena replied almost instantly, keep going. I'll stall them. 15 minutes later, Leo and Mason made their way up the stairs toward the second-floor server room. But just outside the door, they stopped. A girl was standing there, Skylar, arms folded, lips curved slightly, as if she'd been waiting. Going somewhere, Leo, her voice was soft as wind, but her eyes were ice. Leo gave a faint smile. Looking for justice. Want to help. Skylar didn't answer right away. She looked at Mason, still clutching his laptop, then back at Leo. Be careful. There are things even the truth can't save you from. Then she turned and walked away, light on her feet, like nothing had happened. Mason whispered, she knows. Leo replied, yeah. And now, she's scared. The door opened. They stepped inside. The hum of the servers filled the room like the heartbeat of something alive. One question still hung in the air: who was trying to stop Grace? And why they didn't know yet, but they were about to find out. Outside the second-floor server room. 1:15 p.m. Leo paused, his hand on the door handle, but not yet turning it. Mason stood beside him, holding his laptop tightly, a thin sheen of sweat on his forehead. If we go in there and get caught, Mason hesitated, I'll definitely get expelled. Leo looked at him, then down at his own palm. He had hesitated before, but not today. And if we don't, Leo asked, then Grace gets erased. No proof, no justice. Mason replied. They stood still for a moment. Then Leo gave a quiet, certain smile. Then we're exactly where we're supposed to be. The door opened. Inside, the server system hummed like something alive. Mason plugged in his laptop, lips pressed into a line. I'm only going to check the access ID. I won't touch the core files. That might keep us under the security radar. The screen lit up. Access log. Terminal 4B, 2:12 a.m., user admin VAPA 03. Mason muttered, this line, Brent used an override. Only someone whose family funds Studio 4C would have that clearance. Leo remembered Brent had once bragged about his parents being investors at VAPA, especially Studio 4C. And Skylar, Leo asked. Mason ran another search. She used to be an academic assistant last semester. Might still have temporary clearance, but there's one more account. The screen shifted. A new name appeared, Prof. Helena, backup 01. Accessed at 01:53 a.m. Helena. Leo froze. No way. Hold on, Mason double-checked. This is a cloned account. Wrong IP. Someone used her name to cover their tracks. Leo clenched his hand. So it's someone inside, someone who really knows this system. At that exact moment, the door swung open. Skylar stood there, not startled, not surprised, as if she had known all along. "What are you two doing here?" she asked, eyes flicking to the screen. Leo didn't look away. Doing what someone's afraid will be uncovered. Skylar stepped forward, stopping just a few feet away. "You know, Leo, unauthorized system access is enough to get both of you expelled." Mason's hands trembled slightly, but Leo stood, his ground eyes locked on hers. "Then go ahead. Call them," he said slowly. "If you're sure you'll be safe when the truth comes out." The silence stretched, taut as a wire. Skylar gave a faint smile, but said nothing more. She turned and walked away. The door clicked shut behind her. Mason whispered, "She's scared." Leo nodded. "Because we touched something they never thought anyone would dare touch." The screen glowed bright. Final line displayed, "Access granted. 2 sub-accounts linked. Analysis in progress. 1:28 p.m. The second-floor server room was bathed in soft blue light from the rows of screens. Leo and Mason sat silently, eyes locked on the streaming lines of code. A soft ding broke the quiet. Analysis complete. Mason read quickly. There were 2 accounts that used admin-level access on the same night. Admin VAPA 03, traced to IP Brent Owens Guest Support 02, registered IP Tiffany Austin. Leo narrowed his eyes. Tiffany Mason replied, "She interned in the tech department last semester. Probably still has temporary credentials, but there's more." He clicked on the final entry. Activity log, Terminal 4B, 2:13 a.m., open file, Grace Sarg demo 1.wave, command issued lock file, read-only, system override. Log entry Brent Owens, authorized by Tiffany Austin Support Proxy. Leo read each line slowly. Every word sliced through the illusion that had been built over the past few days. They both knew the track was Grace's, and they locked it anyway. Mason nodded. "There's another layer. They use support credentials to spoof a maintenance command and temporarily remove public access. That's why no other faculty could see the file this morning." Leo exhaled. So it wasn't a glitch. It was a plan. Mason reopened the metadata. There's one more detail. The system logs show an edit attempt on the file. Name: it was temporarily erased and then restored. Like someone tried to change the sender's identity, but failed. Leo froze. Change the sender. To whom Mason clicked the recovery tab. A faded string appeared. Sender, Grace Holloway. Deleted, candidate Brent Owens. Leo clenched his fists, nails pressing into his palm. So it wasn't just an attempt to bury the file. They wanted to put Brent's name on it. Mason whispered, "If you hadn't found this, Grace would have watched Brent perform her own composition in front of the entire school." In that moment, Leo said nothing, but fire burned in his eyes. He opened his phone and typed a message to Helena. Confirmed Brent and Tiffany manipulated the system to erase Grace's name. Full data recovered. The reply came almost instantly. "Send me a copy. Get ready to speak." Leo looked at Mason. "You okay?" Mason nodded, though his voice trembled slightly. "No one's ever trusted me with anything this important." Leo gently patted his shoulder. "That's because no one ever dared dig this deep before." A long breath. This time, it was relief. The server room door closed behind them. Above them, an entire system was starting to shake. Tuesday, 2:00 p.m. Council meeting room, 3rd floor. Helena entered with a different presence, dark coat, laptop in hand, her face set cold and stern, like someone who had just uncovered a declaration of war in the school archives. At the table, Kim was touching up her lipstick. Sully stood by the window, arms folded. MacArthur was sipping tea while scanning the rehearsal schedule for the gala performance. "Apologies for the urgent call," Helena began. but there's something you all need to see. She set her laptop on the table. The screen displayed system logs and metadata from the activity at 2:12 a.m. The room fell silent. Only the sound of Helena's clicks could be heard. Click. Accessed by admin VAPA03. IP Brent Owens. Click. Authorized by Tiffany Austin Support. Proxy credential. Click. Command lock file. Grace Demo 01. WAV. Read only. Sully took a step back. MacArthur furrowed his brow. Kim bit her lip. Helena turned to face them one by one, not with anger, but with a clarity as sharp as glass. Two students, Brent and Tiffany, used outdated technical access credentials to illegally lock Grace Holloway's original composition. Not only that, they attempted to change the sender's name to submit it under Brent's. She paused. Mason has a full copy of the logs. Leo sent me the original data. And if needed, I'm ready to present everything before the full Academy board. Sully spoke, voice low. You're certain Helena didn't blink? I am. They did it, and we nearly let it happen. Kim stood up abruptly. But we haven't officially announced the lineup. We still have the right to reject. And if we do, Helena cut in, we become complicit. This evidence is enough for Grace to file a formal grievance against the entire council for manipulation and discrimination. No one spoke. Helena tilted her head slightly, locking eyes with MacArthur. You once said, we teach art, but we don't live in illusion. Well, now's the time to prove that. The air thickened like a wound, dressed but not yet healed. A small chime rang. Sully checked his inbox. Preliminary investigation report. Attached evidence from Leo Martinez. Helena closed the laptop. Calmly. I'm not asking for special treatment for Grace. I'm asking for justice you've already denied her. And if her performance isn't reinstated in this afternoon's final rehearsal, I will take all of this to the Academy president and the media. A closing strike. No shouting, no pressure. Just a statement, like a blade through the sealed doors of VAPA. She turned and walked out of the room. Sully called after her. Helena, you're declaring war on the system. She stopped, not turning back. Good. Because I know who's been trying to keep it rotting day by day. The door closed. Behind it, a silent meeting began to tremble. Wednesday, 10:10 a.m. The third-floor conference room was packed. The air was more suffocating than ever. Helena stood by the window, silently watching the courtyard below, where students had gathered, murmuring about the video that had just been leaked. A video stored by the central server system played that morning, Grace Holloway's original composition being accessed and illegally locked from Studio 4C precisely when Brent, Skylar, and Tiffany had been there after rehearsal. A secretary entered and whispered something. Helena nodded, then turned to face the three students seated before her. Brent, Skylar, Tiffany. Their faces had gone pale. None of the usual arrogance remained. Helena looked straight at them. Which of you would like to explain first? Tiffany pressed her lips together. Brent stared at the floor. Skylar, still silent, her hands gripping the armrests tightly. There is no rule that permits students to access the server management system. Even using a temporary admin credential is a violation of the highest level policy. Helena said each word like a blade. You knew that, and you still did it. Skylar spoke first. We didn't delete it. We just locked it. It was an outdated file, not the official submission. Then why listen to it beforehand? Why log in at 2:12 a.m.? And why use the very equipment in Studio 4C? Helena tilted her head. I won't say I'm disappointed like other teachers. I just want to know why go through all that. To sabotage a janitor girl. No one answered. The door opened. Professor Sully entered, holding a document from the disciplinary council. He handed the paper to Helena. She read it aloud, word by word. Brent Langford, suspended for 1 semester, stripped of all performance rights, and all scholarships temporarily revoked. Skylar Monroe, suspended for 2 semesters, required to withdraw from all organizational roles related to VAPA. Tiffany Chen, highest level warning, next violation will result in expulsion. None of the 3 spoke, but suddenly, Skylar's voice rang out. And what about Grace? You're really going to let some janitor girl perform on VAPA's stage? Helena didn't flinch. We're not letting her up there. She walked up on her own. Skylar made a move to rise, but Sully stepped forward. And if you plan to appeal, just remember the account used to lock the file was borrowed by Brent from a technical assistant. And the entire log was recorded. Tiffany trembled. Brent bowed his head. Skylar slowly sat down for the first time without saying a word. That afternoon, every VAPA student received a school-wide notice. Performance number 17, untitled composition by Grace Holloway, has been officially reinstated for the end-of-term showcase. Final rehearsal is scheduled for 9:00 a.m. tomorrow. Grace read the message on her phone inside the small tech room. Silent. No outburst of joy, just a quiet nod. Once again, she prepared in silence. But this time, no one could lock away her dream ever again. Thursday, 9:00 a.m. Main stage of VAPA. The spotlight fell on a solitary figure seated at the piano. No makeup, no elaborate costume. Just a white shirt, plain black pants, and neatly tied hair. Grace Holloway. The auditorium was nearly empty. This was just a technical rehearsal. But the presence of Helena Sully and even MacArthur in the front row gave the room a strange sense of solemnity. In a far corner, a few curious students stood watching in whispers. Leo sat to the left of the stage, giving a small nod when Grace's eyes found his. Mason beside him, fingers resting on the soundboard. A faint nod. No effects, no introduction, just one first note, deep, low, resonant, like a whisper from someplace far away. Then the piece began, coherent, firm, each rhythm and note unfolding the story. Grace had lived the cold hallways, the insults, the sleepless nights, in the studio the moment her name was erased. And then she stood, began again, more steadfast than ever. No one moved, not a shift in their seats. Not because they were told not to, but because they couldn't look away. When the final note rang out, the room was utterly silent. No applause, because no one dared break the moment. Only Helena, standing first, gave a gentle nod. Then MacArthur. Then the entire judging panel. Tomorrow will be the official performance. But everyone knew this morning was the real show. That afternoon, a new post appeared on VAPA's homepage. The Vanguard Academy of Performing Arts is proud to present a special performance by student Grace Holloway, a testament to resilience, integrity, and the power of music to transcend all barriers. The article made no mention of the controversy before, but everyone knew for that music to be heard. Grace had endured something no composition could ever put into words. Grace never fought back with words. She didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't try to explain. She just wrote. And when the world tried to silence her, it was her music that spoke. This story isn't just about a girl crushed in silence. It's a reminder for all of us that truth doesn't need to shout to exist, and real talent doesn't need applause to shine. Whoever you are, a girl who mops the floors, a boy dismissed too easily, or simply someone searching for your place in the world, remember this: you have worth. You have a voice. And sometimes, just one person believing in you is enough. If this story resonated with you, follow and subscribe to Toch Story. We tell the stories others overlook because sometimes it's the quietest sounds that echo the loudest. Thank you for listening.